If I were to put you on the spot right now and ask you to name the single scariest movie of all time, the one that sits right at the very top of the cultural mountain, there is a very, very good chance you're going to say The Exorcist.
It's the answer I hear most often. I mean, even from people who haven't seen it in 20 years, it just has that reputation.
Exactly. It is a juggernaut. And you have to remember, for anyone who wasn't there in 1973, this wasn't just a movie release. It was, it was a cultural event.
A phenomenon.
Right. We've all heard the stories, haven't we? People fainting in the aisles.
Oh, yeah. The paramedics parked outside theaters in L.A. and New York.
Because the intensity was just too much for audiences to handle. It's got the spinning head, the pea soup, the spider walk. It is like the ultimate spectacle of fear.
It certainly is. And it really set the gold standard for a certain kind of cinematic experience. It's loud, it's visceral, and it confronts you with something. Something undeniable. You just can't look away from it.
And what makes it even creepier, and I think this is the thing we've all whispered about at sleepovers when we were kids, is that tagline on the poster.
Based on a true story.
Based on a true story.
Yeah.
We just love that, don't we? The idea that somewhere out there in the real world, this actually happened. That the devil actually walked into a suburban bedroom.
It grounds it in a reality that's hard to shake.
And that brings us to the start of today's deep dive. We are looking at the real case that inspired The Exorcist. The case of a 14-year-old boy in 1949, known in the literature anyway, as Roland Doe.
Or Robbie Mannheim or Ronald Edwin Hunkler, as we now know from more recent investigations. The names have sort of shifted over the years.
Right. And we are going to dig into all of it. The furniture flying across the room, the guttural voices, the writing appearing on his skin, all of that fascinating, spooky stuff.
But,
okay. And here's where it gets really interesting and where we're going to veer off the beaten path a bit. We aren't just here to tell ghost stories today.
No.
We are using this story as a launching pad to do something a little different. We are going to challenge the very way you define the word horror.
That's right, because when we look at the case of Roland Doe and when we look at the movie The Exorcist, we're looking at a very specific type of fear. It is a fear based on presence. The monster is there. You can see it.
It's throwing things.
It's throwing things. It's loud. But there is another kind of fear. A quieter, colder, and frankly, a much more disturbing kind of fear.
So our mission today is to distinguish between terror and horror. And I know everyone listening is probably thinking, wait, aren't those just synonyms? I thought so too.
Sure, people do.
But apparently they are not. And to help us navigate this, we have a stack of sources that takes us on quite a journey. We have the investigative files on the Roland Doe case, and we have this dense, fascinating academic dissertation.
It's titled Feeling Absence by Kevin Anthony Winter from UC Berkeley.
And that's our roadmap.
That's our roadmap. We are going to travel from the suburbs of Maryland in 1949 through the rise of the American serial killer movie and land in what we're calling continental horror, the post-Berlin Wall European cinema that frankly makes The Exorcist look like a fun roller coaster ride.
It's a journey from the scare of the jump to the horror of the void. So let's settle in. We have a lot of ground to cover. Let's start with the boy, Roland Doe.
Let's do it.
Okay, set the scene for us. It's 1949. We have a 14-year-old boy living in Cottage City, Maryland. This is post-war America, picket fences, quiet neighborhoods.
Exactly. He's from a German Lutheran family. And the phenomena starts, interestingly enough, not with him, but with his Aunt Harriet.
Aunt Harriet.
Right. And the family dynamic here is really important to understand. Roland was an only child, and from all accounts, he was very, very dependent on the adults around him, particularly the women in his life. Aunt Harriet wasn't just an aunt. She was a very close central figure to him.
And she was a spiritualist.
She was a spiritualist, yeah.
A spiritualist in 1949. That sounds a bit spooky already.
You know, it was actually quite common then, this interest in contacting the other side, especially after the wars. But she's the one who introduced this young boy to the Ouija board.
The Ouija board, of course.
They would spend hours using it together. That was their thing.
Which, let's be honest, is never the start of a heartwarming rom-com. If you bring out a Ouija board in the first act, something is going down in the third act.
Almost always. So Aunt Harriet passes away in St. Louis. And then shortly after her death, the house back in Maryland just goes crazy.
And what does that mean, goes crazy? What are we talking about?
We are talking strange noises at first. Squeaking, scratching in the walls. The family described it as the sound of claws, like dragging and scratching against the floorboards.
So naturally, they think it's rats.
Of course. They called an exterminator. He came, checked everything, found nothing, no rats, no squirrels, nothing. And then the phenomena escalated.
And this is where we get into the spectacle that The Exorcist made so famous. The furniture starts moving.
According to the traditional accounts. And here we're relying on reports that were later championed by author Thomas B. Allen. In his book, possessed ordinary objects, things like vases, were said to fly or levitate when the boy was nearby.
Just on their own.
Just on their own. A chair that the boy was sitting in would suddenly spin around or just tip over. The family was, as you can imagine, absolutely terrified.
And because they were Lutheran, they did the logical thing. They went to their Lutheran pastor first.
A man named Luther Miles Schultz. And Schultz is an interesting character in this whole drama, isn't he?
He wasn't just a by-the-book pastor. He had an interest in parapsychology.
He did. He was very curious about the paranormal. He'd read about it. So he actually had the boy spend the night at his own home to observe him directly.
And he saw things.
He claims he did. Schultz claims to have witnessed the furniture moving on its own. He reported seeing a heavy armchair tilt and fall over while the boy was supposedly asleep in bed.
So he's convinced.
He's convinced something is happening that he can't explain. And he's the one who eventually told the family, look, I can't help you with this. This is beyond me. You need a Catholic priest.
You need a Catholic priest. That is the moment the genre is born right there.
That's the line.
So this leads to the involvement of the Jesuits. And this is where the narrative really ramps up into the stuff of legend. There are two main phases to this exorcism, right?
Correct. The first attempt was allegedly conducted by Father Edward Hughes at Georgetown University Hospital.
This is the scene everyone talks about, the one that feels like it was written for a movie.
It's incredibly cinematic. The boy is restrained. He supposedly slips a hand out of a leather strap, breaks a bed spring from under the mattress.
And slashes the priest's arm.
Right, slashes the priest's arm. The ritual has to stop immediately because the priest is injured and, the boy is completely out of control.
So that attempt fails.
Utterly. After that, the family moves to St. Louis to stay with relatives because, and this is a detail, The Exorcist made famous, words started appearing on the boy's body.
Not just random scratches, but legible words.
Legible words. Hell.
Christ.
And then very specifically, the word Louis.
As in St. Louis.
As in St. Louis. They took that as a sign of a literal demonic GPS instruction to go to St. Louis.
That is some very specific demon activity. Go to St. Louis. I mean, usually demons are all about get out or die. This one is giving travel advice.
It is peculiar, but they go. In St. Louis, they team up with Father William Bowdern and Father Walter Halloran, and this is where the major months-long exorcism takes place at the Alexian Brothers Hospital.
And the reports from inside that room are just intense.
They're off the charts, a constantly shaking bed, the boy speaking in a guttural voice, a violent aversion to anything sacred, holy water crucifixes.
And didn't he get violent with the priests?
Oh, yeah. At one point, Roland apparently broke Father Halloran's nose.
And Halloran is one of the key eyewitnesses here. He's the guy who later talked to authors about this. He was there in the room for all of it.
He was. And eventually, after weeks and weeks of this battle, the boy is cured. The possession just lifts. He goes on to lead a totally ordinary life.
He worked for NASA, didn't he?
He worked for NASA, of all places, and passed away just recently in 2020. That is the legend. That is the spectacle. It's the flying objects, the battles, the blood. It is an external war between good and evil.
It's a great story. It really is. It has everything you want in a horror movie.
It does.
But you and I know that every good ghost story has a skeptic in the bushes with a flashlight.
There's always one.
And in this case, we have author Mark Psasnik and the great skeptic Joe Nickell. They went back and looked at the actual evidence, didn't they? They didn't just accept the legend. They did some gumshoe detective work.
They really did. Mark Psasnik in particular did something that apparently no one else had bothered to do in all those decades.
Which was?
He went to Cottage City, Maryland, and he started knocking on doors. He tracked down the neighbors, the childhood friends of Roland Doe, people who actually knew him.
And what did he find? Because usually in these stories, the neighbors say, oh yeah, that house was evil. We saw green light coming from the windows. They add to the myth.
It was the exact opposite, 100% the opposite. The neighbors and friends described Roland not as a possessed victim.
But as what?
As a troubled, somewhat spoiled, and very clever trickster. He was known as a bit of a bully. He liked to scare people. He liked attention.
So the trickster theory emerges. Let's dig into this because some of the debunking is pretty, well, it's pretty damning for the supernatural side of things.
It really is.
Let's talk about the scratches, the words appearing on the skin. To me, that's the most unexplainable part.
Yeah.
How do words just appear on your skin?
Well, Joe Nickel, who is a forensic investigator, he looks at this from a very practical perspective. And he points out a very suspicious detail about those words.
Okay.
The scratches never appeared on parts of the boy's body that he couldn't reach himself. They were never on the middle of his back, for instance. They were always on his chest, his stomach, his legs, places his own hands could easily access.
And didn't someone actually see him doing it?
Yes. There were reports buried deep in the case notes that Allen's book kind of glossed over of the boy being seen scratching himself with his own fingernails. He would hide his hands under the sheets, the bed would start to shake.
And then voila.
Then he'd reveal fresh scratches.
That feels like a massive red flag. What about the guttural voice and the Latin? That's the other big trope. The boy speaking languages he's never learned.
Right. This is where Father Halloran's later testimony gets really interesting once you strip away the legend that built up around it.
So the real Halloran, not the movie version.
The real Halloran later admitted to Upsasnik that he never heard the voice change. He never heard a quote-unquote demonic voice. He said the boy just lowered his pitch and was basically mimicking the priests.
And the Latin.
Halloran suspected the boy was just repeating phrases he'd heard the priests saying over and over and over again during the ritual. He wasn't having conversations in Latin. He was parroting.
That changes the vibe completely. It goes from supernatural possession to like a really intense, prolonged tantrum.
It's a kid listening to what the adults want and giving it to them.
Okay, what about the most violent part? The priest getting slashed with the bed spring? The Father Hughes incident? That's such a specific, terrifying image.
Upsasnik went looking for the hospital records, for any documentation at all.
And
nothing. He couldn't find any evidence it ever happened, no hospital records of the injury, no documentation that Father Hughes ever had an emotional breakdown or disappeared from his parish. It seems that entire sequence was a complete fabrication that got glued onto the story later to make it more dramatic.
So if we look at this coldly, the picture that emerges is a boy who is maybe acting out for attention after the death of a loved one. He's using the Ouija board, scaring his mother, and it just spirals.
It spirals. The adults panic. They bring in priests, and the boy escalates his behavior to match the incredible amount of attention he's suddenly getting.
It's a feedback loop.
Precisely. The more the priests prayed, the more the boy shook the bed.
But here's my question. Why are we starting our deep dive on horror with a hoax? Or, a probable hoax? If this is just a kid with a behavioral issue, why does it matter?
Because the nature of the hoax is what's important. Even if it was all fake, look at what made it scary to the people in that room.
The flying vases.
The flying vases.
Yeah.
The shaking bed, the words on the skin. These are all things you can see. They are spectacles. They're threats that exist in the physical space with you.
It's a monster in the room. There's a something there.
Exactly. It is a something. It has mass. It has volume. It's present. And this is where we need to pivot to our second source, the dissertation by Kevin Anthony Winter. Because he argues that what we just described, the Roland Doe case, and by extension, the movie The Exorcist, isn't actually horror.
Wait, hold on. You're going to tell me The Exorcist isn't horror? It's in the horror section of every streaming service. It's the literal definition of the genre for most people. If I go to a party and say, I love horror, people ask me if I like The Exorcist.
In the colloquial sense, yes, of course it's horror. We all call it horror. But philosophically, Winter argues it's actually terror. And the distinction is crucial if we want to understand how cinema really, really works on us.
Okay, let's unpack this. Terror versus horror. I have always used them as synonyms. Like, I'm terrified and I'm horrified mean the same thing to me. I'm scared out of my mind.
And we all use them interchangeably in daily life. But there is a rich academic debate going back to the mid-19th century, starting with the Gothic novelist Anne Radcliffe, that says they are actually opposites.
Anne Radcliffe, she wrote The Mysteries of Udolpho, right? All that Gothic romance, misty castles, fainting heroines.
That's her. And she wrote an essay where she defined these terms very, very specifically. Radcliffe says that terror awakens the faculties.
Awakens the faculties.
It invigorates the imagination. Terror is about the proximity of a threat. It's when you hear the twig snap in the woods. It's when you see the knife glinting in the dark. It triggers your fight or flight response. It's pure adrenaline.
So when I'm watching The Exorcist and the bed starts banging against the wall and I jump in my seat, that's terror.
Exactly. Your heart rate goes up. Your pupils dilate. You are on the edge of your seat, ready to run or fight. It's a spectacle. It's happening to you right now. It is an external phenomenon bound up with space and the presence of a threat.
It awakens the faculties. I like that. It makes you feel more alive in a weird way. Because you're surviving something.
Precisely. It is the sublime feeling of surviving a threat. Now compare that to horror.
Okay.
Radcliffe says horror freezes and nearly annihilates the faculties.
Freezes and annihilates. That sounds significantly worse.
It is. It doesn't pump you up. It shuts you down. It is linked to time, memory, and absence. It is internal. It is metaphysical.
So it's not the thing happening now. It's the realization of what has already happened or what is missing.
Exactly. It's the feeling of dread when you realize something is deeply wrong, but you can't fight it because there is nothing to punch. It's the realization of a void, is walking into a room and realizing someone who should be there isn't and will never be there again. It's not the monster jumping out, it's the silence after the monster has gone.
That is a heavy distinction. So terror is the monster under the bed. Horror is the empty bed where someone you loved used to be.
That is a perfect way to put it. Terror is presence, horror is absence. Terror is a roller coaster, horror is a funeral.
Wow.
And Winter's dissertation argues that most American horror films are actually terror films. They are thrill rides. They are what he calls art horror. We watch them to be scared in a fun, contained way.
Right, like a roller coaster. You scream, you laugh, you buy the popcorn at the end, you check your heartbeat and you say, whoa, that was crazy. And then you go home and sleep fine.
Exactly. But horror, proper, true horror, is about the dissolution of meaning. It's about encountering absence. It's not about a monster jumping out at you. It's about the feeling that the world has no meaning, or that you are totally irrevocably alone.
So if we follow this map, this intellectual journey, we need to trace how cinema evolved.
Yeah.
Because it seems like American cinema spent a long, long time perfecting the art of terror.
It absolutely did. And we can look at the timeline. Winter and the scholars he cites, like Paul Wells and Robin Wood, they break the genre down into clear phases. Phase 1 is pre-1960. This is the era of consensus and constraint.
This is the classic monster movie era. Frankenstein, Dracula, and then later all the 50s sci-fi stuff. The Thing from Another World, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The threat is always from the outside.
Precisely. Think about the cultural context, the Cold War, the fear of communism, the fear of the atom bomb. In these movies, the threat is an alien. It's a foreign count from Transylvania. It's a giant ant created by radiation. The threat comes from out there to attack us.
And us is usually a small, wholesome American town with good values.
Right. And usually the American institutions, the army, the scientists, the church, are the solution. They defeat the monster and restore order. The sheriff shoots the alien, the scientist finds the cure, and everyone can go back to the neighborhood BBQ.
Keep watching the skies. It's very reassuring, actually. The enemy is identifiable, and we know we can beat it. But then 1960 hits, and everything changes.
1960 is the absolute turning point, specifically Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. This kicks off phase 2, the modern period of horror cinema.
Psycho, Norman Bates. I mean, it's iconic, but why is this the massive shift? It's just a guy in a motel.
Because the monster is no longer an alien. The monster is a nice young man who runs the motel down the road. The monster is the family unit itself.
The threat moved from outside to inside.
Exactly. Robin Wood, a huge figure in film criticism, argues that Psycho is the moment the genre identifies the American nuclear family as the source of the threat. It's the birth of this schizophrenic serial killer born from a twisted mother-son dynamic. It's domestic.
And there's a change in how we feel about the monster, too.
A huge change. We spend half the movie sympathizing with Norman Bates. Remember that scene where he sinks the car with Marion Crane's body in it?
Oh, God, yes. The car stops sinking for just a second, and you find yourself holding your breath, thinking, come on, go down, go down.
And then you catch yourself.
You realize, wait a minute, I'm rooting for the killer to hide the body.
That is the ambivalence of modern horror. We are implicated in the crime. It is an amoral universe. The army isn't coming to save you. In fact, the institutions have failed. The family, the most basic institution, is the source of the horror.
And this era, the 60s, 70s, 80s, it just ramps up the violence, right? We get in the Vietnam era, social fracturing, the Manson murders, and the rise of the serial killer is the central boogeyman.
The serial killer becomes the juggernaut. Think of Michael Myers in Halloween or Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th.
They are unstoppable. They are like sharks on legs. They don't speak, they don't reason, they just kill. There's no negotiation.
And they are pure terror. They are spectacle. Even though they are technically human, they act like supernatural forces. They generate adrenaline. It's the slasher movie. And it's meant to be fun. It's a ride. You go to see how creative the kills are.
You cheer when the annoying teenager gets axed.
Exactly. Don't go in there. We scream at the screen. It's interactive.
So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween, these are the peak of American terror. High energy, high spectacle, lots of screaming. But then, something happens in 1986. A movie comes along that just breaks all the rules.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, directed by John McNaughton.
Now, I have seen this film, and let me tell you, fun is definitely not the word I would use. It feels dirty. It feels boring in a really scary way. It's gritty. It's low budget.
That is exactly what makes it the bridge. It's the film that ends the modern phase of terror and ruptures the genre. It's the bridge between American terror and what we're going to talk about next, continental horror.
So what did it do that was so different?
Well, McNaughton's stated intent was to strip away all the fun of the slasher movie. He wanted to show the banality of evil.
It's based on Henry Lee Lucas, a real killer. But unlike Michael Myers, who stalks teenagers on Halloween with a spooky soundtrack, Henry just hangs out.
He just exists. He sits in a crummy apartment with his friend Otis. They drink beer, they watch TV, they complain about money, they argue about fixing the television set, and then casually, almost as an afterthought, they go out and kill a whole family.
And the movie doesn't give us the why, does it? Usually we get that neat little flashback, oh, his mom was mean to him, or he was bullied at camp. It explains the evil away.
Right. Henry ruptures that logic. There is no psychological explanation offered. We don't get the Freudian excuse to make us feel comfortable. The motives, if they exist at all, are economic or class-based or just because. It decelerates the action. It forces you to sit with the killer in his boring, ugly reality.
There's that one scene, I think this is the most famous scene in the movie, where they watch the video recording of the home invasion they just committed.
Yes. The home video scene. They used a camcorder to record the murder. And afterwards, they are just sitting on the couch, drinking beer, watching the footage on their TV like it's a sports highlight.
And the camera in the movie just sits there, watching them watch the TV. It's silent. It's boring. And it is absolutely bone-chillingly terrifying.
That is the moment the genre breaks. It moves away from the thrill of the kill, which is terror, and moves closer to the deep discomfort of reality. It's real-life horror. It's not about the jump scare. It's about the soul-crushing feeling that there is no moral center to the universe. There is no music to tell you how to feel, just the hum of the refrigerator and the dead eyes of the killer.
And that leads us across the ocean. Because while America was perfecting and then deconstructing the slasher, Europe was going through a massive identity crisis. The Berlin Wall falls in 1989.
A huge historical rupture.
And out of that rubble, that uncertainty, comes a new wave of cinema.
This is what our source Winter calls continental horror.
Now, I've heard this referred to as new extremism. Is that the same thing? We're talking about those really intense French films. Lots of blood, lots of sex, very controversial stuff like High Tension, Martyrs, those kinds of movies.
New extremism is the term coined by the critic James Quant, and it's important to know he used it as an insult.
He didn't like these movies.
He hated them. He wrote this famous article talking about rivers of viscera and spumes of sperm. He thought it was just gratuitous excess for shock value.
He basically said, you guys are just trying to be shocking for the sake of being shocking. Like, look how much blood we can use.
But our expert, Kevin Winter, argues that extremism is a lazy label. It implies too much of something. It implies that these films are just American horror movies turned up to 11. But they aren't. They are doing something fundamentally different. They aren't about excess. They are about symmetry and absence.
Okay, symmetry. That sounds like a geometry term, not a horror term. How does that apply to a movie where people are getting, torn apart?
Let's look at the case study Winter uses. The 2003 film 29 Palms by the French director Bruno Dumont.
This movie it's intense. And it's very frustrating to watch, deliberately so. It's about a couple, David and Katya, driving through the empty desert in California. They are scouting locations for a magazine shoot.
And they don't even speak the same language very well. He speaks French, she speaks Russian, and they communicate in this very broken, functional English.
So they fight, and they have sex.
A lot.
A lot. But look at how they have sex. It isn't romantic. It isn't even really about mutual pleasure. It is aggressive.
It's very... Oh my... David is always grabbing her. He's physically imposing. It's all about his needs.
Precisely. The source analyzes a scene in a motel pool. David approaches her like a shark, literally framed like the shark in Jaws. He grabs her. He asks, "Do you like my penis?" It's not a question. It's a demand for validation. He is asserting his dominance. His pleasure is about taking.
He screams. The source makes a big point about the sounds David makes when he finishes.
Yes. David's orgasmic screams are described as bestial and self-centered. He screams over her. He grounds out her voice. It's a completely closed loop of I want, there's no connection.
Okay, so he's a jerk, a pretty awful boyfriend. How does this become horror? Where's the monster?
Because of the ending. And major spoiler warning here, obviously, for anyone who hasn't seen it. The film ends with a brutal, horrific attack. David is beaten and then raped by a group of men while Katya is forced to watch.
It is a devastating, incredibly hard-to-watch scene.
But watch the symmetry. This is the absolute key to understanding the film. When the rapist reaches his climax, he lets out a scream. And the film uses the exact same framing, the exact same sound quality as David's earlier orgasmic scream in the hotel room.
Whoa. So the movie is saying David's supposed love and the rapist's violence are the same thing.
It is saying they're on the same spectrum of I want. The violence isn't random extremism thrown in for shock value. It is the logical, symmetrical conclusion of the character's dynamic. The rapist is just a mirror of David's own selfish aggression. The film strips away the illusion of romance to show the raw, violent taking that was underneath it all along.
That is horrifying.
Yeah.
Because it means the violence was there the whole time. It was in the hotel room. It was in the car. It wasn't an outside invader.
Exactly. But notice, it's not terror. It's not a jump scare. It is a slow, crushing realization of the ugliness of human nature. And it relies on that empty desert landscape, the absence of help, the absence of traditional narrative satisfaction.
It strips everything away. It's not adding a monster. It's taking away the illusion of civility and love.
That is continental horror. It uses violence not for a thrill, but to expose a void at the center of things.
Which brings us to our final segment. The film that I think perfectly captures this idea of horror as absence. If The Exorcist is the king of terror, this movie is the king of horror. We are talking about the 1988 Dutch-French film Stoorloos.
Better known to English-speaking audiences as The Vanishing.
A masterpiece. And terrifying in a way that just it gets under your skin and stays there for years. Stanley Kubrick actually called it the most terrifying film he had ever seen.
And if Kubrick says it's terrifying, you listen.
So for those who haven't seen it, the setup is deceptively simple. A young Dutch couple, Rex and Saskia, are on a road trip in France. They stop at a busy gas station. It's crowded. It's sunny. It feels totally normal. Saskia goes into the shop to buy some drinks.
And she never comes back. She vanishes.
No struggle, no scream. Just gone. Erased. And Rex spends the next 3 years obsessed, just consumed with finding out what happened to her. He puts up posters everywhere. He goes on TV.
But the movie does something interesting. It doesn't hide the killer from us. This isn't a whodunit. We meet him almost immediately. His name is Raymond Lemure.
And Raymond is one of the most disturbing villains in cinema history because he is so normal.
He's aggressively normal. He's not a mutant. He's not a glowing alien. He's a chemistry teacher, a family man. He has a wife and 2 daughters that he clearly loves. He drives a decent car.
He's a statistical person, as the source calls him.
Yes. He treats murder like a science experiment. And this is crucial. He isn't a sexual sadist in the traditional sense. He isn't doing it because he gets turned on by pain. He's testing a hypothesis.
Let's talk about his origin story, because it is so bizarre and so chillingly intellectual. It goes back to when he was a teenager.
He recounts this moment when he was 16 years old. He was standing on a balcony, and he thought to himself, it is predestined that I won't jump. My survival instinct prevents me.
So what does he do?
So to prove that he had free will, that he could defy what was predestined for him, he jumped.
He jumped off a balcony just to prove a philosophical point to himself.
Yes. He broke his arm, but in his mind, he proved he could do it. He proved he was the master of his own fate. He was capable of the unthinkable act.
He has to prove that he is capable of anything, no matter how irrational.
Right. And later in life, years later, he saves a young girl from drowning. A truly heroic act. His daughter thinks he's a hero. The whole town thinks he's a hero. But Raymond thinks, this heroism is meaningless unless I can prove that I am also capable of the ultimate evil.
Black cannot exist without white.
Exactly. He decides he must commit the ultimate crime just to prove to himself that he can. It's purely an intellectual exercise for him.
So he practices. This is the part of the movie that just chills me to the bone. He practices the kidnapping like he's rehearsing for a play.
He's so methodical. He measures his own heart rate. He chloroforms himself to see how long the dose lasts. He times how long it takes to get an imaginary person into a car.
He's the banality of evil personified. He treats a human life like a variable in an equation. He makes mistakes, he corrects them. He even casts his own arm in a fake cast to look harmless and elicit sympathy. It's all a calculation.
Purely statistical.
So fast forward 3 years. Rex, the boyfriend, is on TV, making another appeal, begging for the truth. He says, I just want to know what happened. I won't call the police. I just need to know. And Raymond, he sees this.
And he contacts him. Raymond meets him at a cafe, and he makes a proposition. He says, I will tell you exactly what happened to Saskia, but the only way for you to know is to experience it yourself.
This is the ultimate trap of curiosity.
Yeah.
Rex knows, deep down, that this means death. He knows this man sitting across from him is the killer. But the not knowing, the absence of the truth, is worse than death for him. The void of not knowing where she is has completely destroyed his life.
That is the horror of absence made manifest. The void is so unbearable that Rex drinks the cup of coffee Raymond offers him, knowing it's drugged. He chooses the certainty of death over the horror of the void.
And then the ending. The ending that ruins everyone who watches it for the first time.
Rex wakes up, it's pitch black. He tries to light his lighter and he realizes he is in a box. He has been buried alive.
No escape, no battle, no final confrontation, just darkness and silence.
But here is the detail that the source highlights, and it is the key to everything we've been talking about. Where does Raymond bury them?
He doesn't bury them in the woods. He doesn't dump them in a river. He buries them in his own garden.
Underneath his holiday home. The final shot is Raymond sitting on a bench reading a book while his wife and children play happily in the grass. And he knows that right beneath his feet, Rex and Saskia are in the ground.
Why keep them so close? Why not get rid of the evidence?
So he can feel their absence.
Or not.
That is the definition of horror proper, according to Winter. It isn't the violence of the attack. It isn't a jump scare. It is the freezing of faculties. It is the realization that you are being erased from existence. Raymond erases them from the world, but keeps the substance of their absence close to him. He successfully creates a void. He sits on that bench, enjoying the beautiful day, feeling the weight of the nothingness he created.
That connects back perfectly to what we said at the beginning and Radcliffe's definition. Terror awakens you. It's the fight, the struggle. Horror freezes you. Rex in that box. He is frozen. He is annihilated. There is no fight left.
Exactly. Terror is the furniture flying across the room in The Exorcist. You scream, you run, you call the priest. There is activity. Horror is being buried alive while the man who put you there sits 6 feet above you, enjoying a sunny afternoon with his family. One is a spectacle, the other is a silence.
That is profoundly disturbing.
Yeah.
And it really makes you look at American horror movies differently. We love the serial killer who chases us. We love Michael Myers because at least if he's chasing us, we exist. We matter to him.
Yes. If you are being chased, you are the protagonist of the story. You are prey, but you are present. In Sporlus, you are just a statistic. You are nothing. You are an experiment that has concluded. And that is the true horror, being reduced to nothing.
So let's bring this all home. We have been on quite a journey today. We started with Roland Doe, a boy who, maybe scratched words on his own skin to get attention, to say, I am here. Look at me. There's a presence inside me. That is terror. That is spectacle.
And we ended with Raymond Lemure, a man who quietly erases people to prove a philosophical point to himself. That is horror. That is absence.
A journey from the scream to the silence.
And as we reflect on how cinema has evolved, it seems we are moving closer and closer to that silence, especially in international film. American horror so often reflected the anxiety about the family, about society breaking down. Continental horror reflects a deeper anxiety, an anxiety about existence itself, about the void.
So here's the takeaway for you listening. Next time you sit down to watch a scary movie, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Am I feeling terror, that adrenaline spike, that fight or flight, that fun scare where I know I'm safe? Or am I feeling horror, that heavy dread, that paralysis, that lingering sense that something is fundamentally wrong with the world?
And if you find yourself watching a movie where nothing seems to be happening, where the dread is just building and building in the silence, don't check your phone. Don't look for the jump scare. Sit with it. That feeling of unease, that is the real thing. That is the horror of the void.
And I'll leave you with one final thought, something to keep you up tonight. We talked about Raymond Lemure and his need to prove he could do evil. He believed that our capacity for good is meaningless, unless we also have the capacity for ultimate evil.
It raises a deeply unsettling question. Is the scariest thing in the world a monster hiding under your bed? Or is it simply the empty space where a person used to be?
Thanks for diving deep with us. Sleep tight.